so you can play.
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and it's time for another video in the series of Matthew reviews his initial impressions. I know I'm reviewing my initial impressions. I think my initial impressions are great. Of 7th edition 40K. Today we are going to talk about monstrous creatures and vehicles. But before we get into that, don't forget you can win one of two of these. One of them is going to be given away to a random vault member, whether a trial member or not, sometime in June. The other one is going to be given away to somebody who follows the instructions in the video description below. Hear that? It's pretty heavy. And what is that? That's the 40K Munitorum thing. It has the rules and all the cool stuff. It's a limited edition thing, so you might not even be able to get it now. I'm not even sure if it's sold out or not. Not really sure. It doesn't really matter. You can win one for free, so it's worth it. Let's go try it out. So I want to talk about some of the changes to monstrous creatures and to vehicles. We saw some major changes to vehicles and some minor changes to monstrous creatures that'll have probably some major impact. I've already talked about some, like flying monstrous creatures not being able to switch from swooping to gliding and charging in the same turn. So we've already covered that in the last video, but that's a big change right there. There's two major changes that I saw monstrous creatures have, and that's one of them. So the flying monstrous creatures took a bit of a nerf there. But at the same time, they can't be grounded as easily, so that's okay, because now at the end of each phase, rather than every time he's hit, if they took a wound, not a hit, so no Tau marker lights, then they have to take a grounding test. One single grounding test for the entire phase. So it's a 2/3 chance that they're fine, which is a big deal, because more of the times I'd be like rolling 4 or 5 of them, and that's why my Hive Tyrant would go down. So now the flying Hive Tyrants are going to be a little better. But the other change that has happened, and this is going to make the talking about monstrous creatures not that long, is the smash attacks. Smash attacks work exactly the same as they did before, except one minor change. Instead of doing half the attacks, they do 1. Did we really need to do that? Maybe. I guess if they're trying, they're simultaneously buffing vehicles, as we're about to see. So I think it makes sense that they would nerf smash attacks, which are like an awesome killer of vehicles. I think they're trying to sell more vehicles, which I think is a good idea, because vehicles have kind of gotten the short end of the stick. Not flyers, but other vehicles in 6th edition. They were awesome in 5th edition and 4th edition, and then they kind of took a hit in 6th edition, and now they're coming back. So I can see that. I can see them kind of changing the meta of the game, which I agree with doing, by the way. I think they should switch it back and forth, so that kind of forces people to play differently. And those who are stuck in their old ways saying, oh, it sucks because this doesn't work anymore. Well, I know that not everybody's going to be able to afford everything, but it's nice to kind of force players to change it up. So that's the major changes to monstrous creatures that I can tell you about. Vector Strike has changed, but I'm going to talk about that in the special rules video, which is going to be the last video in this series. So what has changed with vehicles? Well, a few things. Major changes too. The first major change is the vehicle damage table. It is no longer, you're no longer able to destroy a vehicle with a non-AP2 or AP1 weapon, unless it's open-topped, of course. And that is because the table is more like the building table, wherein now it actually goes all the way up to 7. So you're rolling a d6 for armor penetration. Well, if you have no way to add to that, you're not going to get to 7. And 7 is where it actually explodes. 6 is immobilized, so you can't actually wreck it unless you're doing an AP2 weapon, AP1 weapon, or it's open-topped. That's a big deal, because now, like on a 1 to 3, all you do is shake the crew rather than stunning them. So it's going to take a lot more to really disrupt the abilities of a vehicle. Sorry, I just need to take a drink here. Ah, and an itchy nose. So yeah, so it makes them much more survivable. On top of that, now all vehicles, unless they're immobilized, are going to be weapon skill 1. So before, if you didn't move it, it's weapon skill 0, you'd automatically hit it in close combat. Now, except for walkers, of course, but those are kind of their own thing. Now, unless they're immobilized, they're always weapon skill 1, which means stay still, no problem. And there's a lot of times where you're moving the vehicle just because you see some close combat guys nearby, and all of a sudden your shooting capabilities were really diminished. Now you don't have to worry about that. And if you're immobilized, you don't have a choice. So it does make them harder to hit in close combat overall. But most of the time that I was attacking vehicles with my Tyranid little guys and the big guys, they had most likely moved anyway. So I don't know if that'll be a huge change, but it definitely will be a change. Also, flyers no longer have this locked velocity nonsense, which is always hard to really take care of. Now if a flyer gets immobilized on a 1 or a 2, instead it is just destroyed. It crashes and burns. So that's the immobilized result only has that effect on it. We did talk about this already, but because we're talking about vehicles, I should mention again. Psychic powers, only Witchfire can be used from within a vehicle, and you can't target a unit inside a vehicle with a blessing or malediction. So it nerfs the Psychers inside a vehicle thing a little bit, because I'm pretty sure, although I could be wrong, that you could cast a blessing or a malediction from inside of a vehicle, I think. I could be wrong right there, though. Also, the last thing is that changes to chariots. Chariots aren't like hugely used, but it's an interesting thing that they decided to do, and that is that the guy inside the chariot is now stuck inside that chariot. For example, with the Necrons, you bring an Overlord and a Catacomb Command Barge, which is a chariot. Before, it was just an open-top transport, so he could jump out of it, the chariot could be destroyed, and he was with it. Now, him and the chariot, they're all one, which also means if he reanimates, he comes back with the chariot. And yes, that is not just my interpretation of the rule. That is actually what it says. It says if it comes back for some reason, it comes back with the chariot with 1 hull point. So that Overlord and the Catacomb Command Barge, all of a sudden you kill him, and he has Ever Living, and he got a Resurrection Orb, he's got a 50% chance of just coming back with that chariot, which is a big difference, because that's a whole chariot with it. It's good. And he gets to go around and keep doing his thing, because you probably killed him in your turn, and then he comes, oh yeah, it's just awesome. So Chariots definitely saw a change, which I think is overall a buff. I know that some people might think, well, now the Overlord can't leave, and that's kind of a negative thing, but he wasn't ever leaving it anyways until it was destroyed. It was kind of the point of putting him in it, was so he didn't have to leave it, because he drove around in this chariot. So it has done some minor modifications of chariots, but overall the big change to vehicles has been in the vehicle damage chart. And while there isn't a lot to talk about with that, it will really change how strong vehicles are and how much it takes to destroy them. It affects the transports inside, or for transport vehicles, it affects the passengers inside. Whereas before, if you stun them, then they couldn't really fire except for snapshots. Now, if you do anything to the vehicle, shaken, stunned, immobilized, or weapon destroyed, the unit inside has to make a leadership test or fire snapshots the next turn. And that's a big deal. And now, when a vehicle explodes, everybody around it takes a strength 4 hit, not a strength 3 hit. That's a big difference. When you got a bunch of little guys around it just trying to destroy it, and all of a sudden it's strength 4 instead of strength 3, that's more dead guys from the explosion, especially if it's low armor save guys like Gaunts or Orcs or Eldar or Tau. I don't know why they'd be in close combat with the vehicle, but hey, you never know. So the fact that they explode harder, that they're harder to hurt, and they're harder to hit in close combat makes vehicles definitely buffed in this. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's been no nerf to the vehicle whatsoever, which I believe it needed. So 2 thumbs up for those changes, even though it is going to mean that I'm going to have a harder time fighting vehicles. But I also have a Necron army, so hey, I get the benefit of both worlds. I get benefits if monstrous creatures get buffed, and I get benefits if vehicles get buffed. It's just all a fun game anyways. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more of me going over my initial reaction to the 40K 7th edition changes. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Happy wargaming.
We work so you can play.